and all city officials present here today. Thank you so much for coming. Also like to thank the media for coming through at such short notice. It's been a very long 3 weeks, not only for us, but for many of our residents in Johannesburg who have been waiting with bated breath as to when will we announce the mayoral committee. It has been a good 3 weeks, a good investment into the future of Johannesburg. Yes, we would have loved to rush to announce 10 MMCs, but given the nature of the minority government that we had, we really saw it prudent that we should give ourselves the time that we needed to talk to other parties and see if we cannot stabilize this government by having a minority government turn into a majority coalition government. I'm happy to announce that today we have managed to come to a point where we now have a majority coalition government in Johannesburg, and that we will be having 10 MMCs in office after their swearing in, which will be happening very soon. I will now go on to announce who those MMCs will be, and then we will take questions. As you know, we've got 10 portfolios in the city of Johannesburg. Those have not changed. We have finance, group corporate and shared services, transport, development planning, housing, economic development, health and social development, community development, environment and infrastructure services delivery, as well as public safety. The following will be the MMCs. For finance, we have Councillor Julie Sadabi from the Democratic Alliance. For group corporate and shared services, we have Councillor Leonard from the Democratic Alliance. For transport, we have Councillor Funzela Ngobeni from Action SA. For development planning, we have Councillor Belinda Eshio Zonjoku from the Democratic Alliance. For housing, we have Councillor Mlungisi Mabaso from the IFP. For economic development, we have Councillor Nkuli Mbundu from Action SA. For health and social development, we have Councillor Franco De Lange from the Freedom Front Plus. For community development, we have Councillor Ronald Winston Harris from the ACDP. For environment and infrastructure services delivery, we've got Councillor Michael Sun from the Democratic Alliance. And last but not least, for public safety, we've got Councillor David Tembe from Action SA. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the team of 10 MMCs who will be working together to take the city of Johannesburg forward, with myself as the Executive Mayor, our Speaker of Council, Councillor Vasco da Gama, and our Whip of Council, Councillor Terrell Myers. Thank you very much. We will now be taking questions.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take 3 hands at a time. Is it ready, Executive Mayor? Ready? Sorry. Okay. Please, can you state your name and your media house?
Will the conditions of the coalition agreement be made public? If not, why? And second of all, the MMCs that you announced seem not to be here to explain their absence.
Hi, it's Govind from UNCA. Just explain how many seats these MMCs of this coalition government represents in council?
How many seats?
You said this is a majority government. Is it a majority? Is it represents a majority in council? And you'll be able to pass decisions in council without needing the help of the EFF?
Governors. Can we take one more? Can we take one more? Yeah.
Thank you for those questions. Zianda, in terms of challenges in constituting the councils, we have a 10-party government. There is a lot of parties, each one with its own wish list. The process of the different iterations of looking at the best makeup of parties to have as strong a government and as stable a government as possible takes time. In fact, we have picked up some legislative gaps where in other countries that have more experience with coalition governance have about 3 months to work out coalitions. In South Africa, we don't have that luxury. So given those restrictions, I really think we did very well. And I think the international community would really applaud us that for 10 political parties to come to this kind of decision in 3 weeks is really commendable. So we'll check, we might just have broken a record. In terms of the difficulties, I think that, there's going to be a briefing by the multi-party coalition committee who have been handling the negotiations from even before the election of the mayor, the speaker and the chief whip. We find it fitting for them to speak to media directly, as I was not part of all the negotiations, and negotiations in Tshwane had a bearing on Johannesburg, etc. So they're still going to be briefing the media, hopefully today still. I'm not sure when it will be happening. Was there fighting? No, I wouldn't say there was fighting. There was bargaining, as would be the case. You've got 10 positions, 10 political parties. You want a strong government. You want the best for residents. You want the best to take the city forward. So there would be a lot of bargaining in that process. And yes, that happened vigorously so. But I'm happy today to say that we have found each other and we're now at this point. Tando, you're asking why the MMCs are absent. The reason why the MMCs are absent is because we will be having a swearing-in ceremony, which will be public, and the MMCs will be present at that ceremony. We have been negotiating, I must say, up until even this morning, but we don't want to keep the residents waiting. We don't want to keep the officials waiting. There's been a lot of anxiety in the system as to what is going on. Will we ever get this right? And we really felt as soon as we found each other that we need to allay everybody's fears and manage anxieties, that we have broken through and that we have a very strong team to take the city forward. So we will be presenting the MMCs to you very soon. In terms of the coalition agreement, I've already said that the team that's been handling the negotiations will be making a lot of information available to the media, including the coalition agreement. So that will definitely be made public. Govern, in terms of how many seats, again, what took long to get to this point is that we tried to be as inclusive as we possibly could. And this was really an investment into the stability of the city and the growth of the city. You know what's happened in the last 5 years, where we had a lot of instability. And in order to avoid that and having to learn from our lessons, we decided that we want to include as many parties as possible. We got to 10 parties, giving us a number of 136, which is a majority government, as you know, in Johannesburg. To constitute a majority, which is a 50% plus 1, you need 136 seats, and I'm happy to say that we've managed to get to that number. Thank you very much.
Are there any further questions? Okay, I'll start with you.
I'm familiar from the start. The question I've got for the day is, you have fallen under criticism for the approach you had on the group Do you feel this team is good enough to support you? Do you feel that you are ready for this job?
Okay, second question.
Madam Mayor, I know that you said there's a coalition negotiation team that is trying to make their own briefing, but you mentioned that there are 10 political parties involved in this coalition setup. What about those that didn't get elected onto the cabinet, the quote unquote? What will happen to them? Do you maybe see them maybe being elected into other committees like your section, you know, the MPEX or so forth? And which parties are those, if you don't mind sharing?
This one.
Can I go?
Yeah.
Thank you. It's Joburg again from ENCA. May I understand I understand there's some discontent within the Johannesburg caucus in terms because of the allocation of these portfolios to the coalition partners and the proportion of chairpersons of committees that will be allocated to the other coalition partners who aren't MMCs, while the Democratic Alliance's own caucus members are not getting those positions. What are you going to do about this? You're afraid that it could lead to those councillors in the DA voting with another party in council because of their discontent?
Thanks again for the questions. Itumeleng, on the Diepkloof electricity issue, I've spoken a lot on this issue. I think I spent most of last week on the issue. First of all, this is an Eskom electricity issue, which unfortunately is happening within the city of Johannesburg. I have been approached by residents to mediate between themselves and Eskom, and I have engaged both residents and Eskom to try and find middle ground. As I have communicated previously, Eskom's concern is acts of criminality within the electricity supply space, where some residents have been found to be fiddling with infrastructure, connecting illegally to the grid, bypassing meters, and even purchasing power from ghost vendors. Again, Eskom is lamenting the culture of non-payment, which has led to an untenable situation where they can no longer afford to continue supplying electricity to areas with a more than 80% non-payment rate. On the other hand, some residents are saying they cannot afford to pay for electricity. Some, however, we know can afford, but have chosen not to pay. My role as a mediator was to understand both sides, and I think I've understood very well both sides and what needs to happen. Eskom has reported that since my intervention, they are seeing the payment levels increase, so people are starting to pay. That's good news to us because even City Power has its own battles with non-payment. It means that the culture is already starting to change. In just 3 weeks, that is a big, big achievement. What we will be doing for the ones who can't afford to pay, I have already requested social development to scale up the registration of people onto the indigent database so they can access the expanded social package of the city, which is a package of subsidies or rebates across different functional areas, including free basic services such as free basic electricity. So what this means is that you only have two options. You either can afford to pay and are paying, or you cannot afford to pay and are registered for ESP. Anything in between will make you vulnerable as a resident to illegal acts. And we're trying to avoid that by making sure that those who can't afford are registered for ESP. But ESP is not an end in itself, and we emphasize the need for people to access opportunities, whether by government or civil society, to find their way out of poverty and move up the social gradient so they can hop off the welfare system of government. Do I think I've handled it well? Absolutely. In fact, there's a lot of support for the hard line that we've taken, that the culture of non-payment will no longer be accepted. It will only be understood by those who cannot afford, but they also have a responsibility to register for ESP. And so we will be continuing with that position. There is a lot of support from ratepayers from across the city who indirectly have been carrying these non-paying areas, because each time they have to be subjected to tariff hikes, it's because there is a gap somewhere in the system. This is the most prudent and fairest approach to take into consideration the need for everyone to come on board as we rebuild our broken city. I hope I've answered all the questions. Do I think the team is good enough? Yes, I'm very happy with the team I ended up with. Fortunately, many of them I know. I know Councillor Funzi Ngobeni. I've worked with him as an MMC. I know Councillor David Tembe. He was the Chief of Police when I was MMC. We had a great relationship. I know Councillor Mabaso. He's been an IFP councillor for the 5 years that I've been a councillor, and he's been MMC for housing as well. There's only a few new councillors, but I've seen their CVs, and I'm really excited for Johannesburg, because I think finally Johannesburg is going to get the best of the best, and they're going to get what they deserve. Am I ready for the job? I've been ready for the job a long time ago. I think I demonstrated my worth when I served as an MMC for Health and Social Development. I served with excellence, and there's proof on the ground. Now there's an opportunity to build on that and have the same kind of impact in all the 10 portfolios, providing leadership and oversight as the executive mayor. The SABC, what about those that did not get MMC positions? Indeed, you were right. You answered the question. We have looked at the 17 chairperson positions that we have in Johannesburg, and we have tried as best as we can to accommodate the other parties within those chairperson positions. I will not be announcing those. I will leave that to the Multi-Party Coalition Negotiations Committee, which will be briefing the media in a very short while. In terms of which parties as well, if you don't mind, I would prefer to leave that to the Multi-Party Coalition Negotiations Committee to give you an overall view of the outcome. My focus is the executive, which is the 10 MMCs that I've already announced. Govan, you're talking about discontent amongst the Joburg caucus. I think there's discontent all around. Discontent started when we got the election results, and all the parties realized that we did not get the outright majority that we wanted, and that automatically meant that we could not have the MMCs that we wanted. We had to share, we had to compromise, we had to negotiate with other parties, we had to be accommodating. So if you talk to Action SA, you will find the same discontent. If you talk to any other party, you will find the same discontent, because nobody got what they wanted, but the residents of Johannesburg got what they wanted. They wanted a multi-party government that will put their interests first, and that we have given them, and we pledge our unity. It's going to take a lot of leadership skill on my end to bring the team together, do a lot of relationship building and team building on an ongoing basis over the next 5 years to ensure that this government stands and takes the city forward. Will they not vote with other parties? Well, they have no reason to do that. Equally, we could ask, will the other parties who are not happy vote with us? It would not make sense. Everybody understands this was a democratic election. The voters have spoken. It is their will that's left us in this position. But I'm happy to say to our voters today that they have really trained us up well to be accommodating, to be collaborative, consultative, and that today they have a government that represents all their various constituencies. And I believe this was the best outcome indeed for the city of Johannesburg. Thank you.
We'll just take one last round of hands, if there are any. All right, I think that's done. Thank you so much for coming at such short notice, and we'll let you know if there are any further announcements. And thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, City Manager. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That's all.
Thank you.
Life crossing.
No.